Welcome. This is the podcast series dedicated to living a revenue culture. Long-term business survival is about creating the maximum profit, and this is only accomplished when you first develop and maximize a people-first culture. So we bring you people who have something interesting to tell you. They have good stories, and they've got a history in this space of building a revenue culture. Today, that is my friend Mike Toney, and Mike started his career as a rocket scientist, or at least on the team with rocket scientists. And then he moved up in the world and he became a top producing salesperson at Hewlett Packard. And then he moved up again and he became an entrepreneur, founding Conquest Training and bringing in Sandler Sales Franchise into Conquest, and then added his own intellectual property to the mix. And he's been doing that a long time and had great results. So welcome, Mike.
Well, thank you, Rick. I appreciate it. And just for clarity for everybody's point of view, Rick has taught me so much in the 12 years, 15 years we've been together. You're a wonderful contribution to this community that we serve.
Well, thank you. Thank you. We're a pretty good team.
Yeah.
So tell everybody about your journey, because I find, starting in the world of science and engineering, and then ending up as one of the real gurus of selling, not just individuals, but organizations. I think that's a very interesting story, and I think others would like to hear it.
Yeah, it was a very interesting path, right? Literally started with an electrical engineering degree with a computer science minor, transition a path from designing, as you said, rocket scientist, but actually I worked on transponder systems for intercontinental ballistic missiles. That's what I think you meant. And then moving to other things like factory automation and or software design, which in the mid 80s was really taking off. A little company came by, picked me up. Little company you mentioned, Hewlett Packard, right? And I fell in love with this concept of teaching and helping people and that type of stuff through that process. So that was a pretty big transition in my mid 20s that took place. Early 30s, perhaps, I think is the probably more accurate number. And then one point I was doing a talk, teaching literally a new piece of technology Hewlett Packard just came out with. And I saw the salespeople that were making anywhere from 5 to 10 times what I was making in the back of the room, just waiting for me to get done. And I literally said to my boss that afternoon, hey, I want that job because I want to make more money. And I didn't know what I was asking for, to be quite honest, right? I really didn't. And that process literally took me down a path of something that I absolutely loved, which was the sales process, right? And because I'm an engineer, I didn't realize that there was so much science in selling, and I didn't realize that there was so much art form in selling. And it's really the beautiful hybrid of something that you put process and psychology and communications, your value system into it. I mean, it's such a wonderful mix of things that you and I both use, I think, probably the same term. It's a diagnostic science that you can measure, quantify, and at the same moment, better yourself as a human being on a consistent, regular process. And I've been doing it now for over 35 years. And I haven't touched a slide rule or a set of calipers in for years, right? So it is absolutely the passion that has taken over my life. Absolutely.
Mike, I love the language. I know how passionate you are about this, and I also know, and you talked about a little bit in the journey, the purposefulness, the doing something for others and helping other people grow. And when you think about your work of helping organizations find real salespeople instead of pretenders and wannabes, and then help them grow and learn the difference between the science and the myths. To what extent is purpose important in that? I mean, everybody wants to, of course, make more money, but I think there's, I know how you work, and there's a lot more to what you do than just making money. So how does purpose play into the work you do with others today?
You've asked a very loaded question, so let's tear it apart a little bit, because there's not one direction I can just take that answer. We got to take it from multiple angles, if you're okay with that. So I think you teach your guiding North Star principle. I think for me, purpose is something I have to align myself with and my job with, so that if those things are in conflict with each other, it's really hard to accomplish your goals, right? So if my own personal purpose and my job's purpose aren't in alignment, it's like two ships trying to row against each other. It's a tug of war. So I think it always helps if you're people focused, right? So to your point, I think you called them wannabes, or I'm not exactly sure how you said it.
Pretenders, wannabes.
Pretenders and wannabes. Yeah, I actually think there are 4 layers to sales professionals or salespeople, right? There's the order taker, there's the fraud who says he is. So the order taker just sits there and collects orders like a ticket cashier at AMC Theater or something, right? Like they just collect orders and give out tickets. The fraud says he's a salesperson, but really doesn't know what he's doing. And then there's the amateur above that, which carries a quota, has some results. And then there's the professional. And on top of that, so those are the 4 layers I make that distinction about. And layers 3 and below, that is the amateur, the fraud, and the order taker, are typically doing just that, chasing dollars regardless of purpose, right? It's typically, I find a lot of people are very me focused. I'm trying to close a deal so I can make a car payment, or I'm trying to make my house payment. I can feed my kids. It's very me focused. Whereas when you become purpose focused, the monies you make become the byproduct of extremely focused customer centricity. And that byproduct is wealth. I mean, the ultimate wealth, right? So people who can let go of themselves and pour their heart into their North Star, their guiding light, their purpose, are typically the people who are the most happiest, and then most importantly, making the most money. Elon Musk comes to mind, right? Like, he's not in the news right now or anything, but this guy is motivated on purpose, right? I mean, he's got huge purpose, and he happens to be the wealthiest man on earth. I don't think anything like that could be more accurate measurement than that. And I think we can look at hundreds of instances like that.
That's exactly, as you're telling the story and telling your journey, I tell people all the time, the best salespeople I get to interact with, most of them are engineers. And I think this happens because engineers start out with a purpose of doing great engineering, but then they realize that great engineering and great selling are really very linked together, because you're solving a problem that people have, and you're doing everything in your power to solve that problem at a high level. And so, since I get to deal with a lot of engineering companies, the engineers get to help explain and help build really wonderful solutions. And once they make that comfortable in their head, they're spectacular.
Well, that's exactly right. I think so. I have to, our customer bases are pretty different, right? Like, I have a lot of non-engineering customers, and so I'm teaching them our thought process of engineering in sales from the standpoint of, okay, the customer has problem A, right? Well, that's just a symptom, right? That's just a symptom of the real problem. The problem is like 4 layers below that, organizationally, personally. There's a lot of things. And I don't care if I'm talking to a roofing company or if I'm talking to a high-tech firm or a mortgage company, it doesn't matter. The problem that you solve is something you're passionate about solving, but then if you just put a Band-Aid on that, it's the wrong solution. That's what the amateur does, right? I can fix that by just throwing a Band-Aid on it. And then the problem doesn't really go away. And that's where poor brand recognition comes from, or, complaints come from, misset expectations. There's a whole litany of consequences to not fixing the real problem. So engineers love to, if they're really committed to solving a problem and helping a customer, they go 2, 3, 4 layers deeper to find the ultimate impact to the organization, to the team, to the company, to the person. And that's what makes a huge distinction in a sales team. When they're, I would much rather go against a highly trained sales team than I would a purpose-driven sales team. You know what I mean? Like, you could train somebody the best techniques in the world, the best passion, or the best velocity, the best cold calling scripts, all those things. But you put the same number of people on the street with purpose, the purpose-driven company will kick their butt every day, right? Like, that people don't realize that it is such a competitive advantage to have a purpose-driven sales team. And when I say sales team, I think your business development reps, I think your account executives, your customer relation managers, these are the people who have first touch to a customer. They are selling your story, your brand, your concept, your products, your relationship, your retention, your referrals. All of those things come out of those teams.
Well, and I love where you're going with that, because to me, that purpose-driven team is trying to transfer the value created by that purpose to people who really appreciate that value. And they're good at matching, as Simon Sinek would say, it's the why level piece. But,
right.
When you have the purpose, you're all about moving that value to others so others can experience it and enjoy it, and of course pay you for it.
Right. Well, it's funny because we had a conversation with a client today with, I have what I call my ninja class salespeople, right? Very purpose driven, very, very high end people. And the other thing that they don't realize is the health of the organization gets so much better when the purpose-driven sales teams are doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? Like, when a sales guy just sells something because he needs his car payment or his house payment or whatever the case is, he'll bring a deal across the table. Even, sometimes they're self-generated. Like, we have the wrong measurement system. Oh, we've got to close X number of deals or X dollars by a given month, right? And so they'll drag anything through the door in order to make that metric, right? Rather than having the right deal at the right time, as you and I would say, right? So they'll bring anything into the table, versus a purpose-driven company will bring a healthier deal with better margins, typically bigger average deal sizes by a lot. Company, the one I'm talking about specifically, my first year with them, their average deal size was $3,000. Today, it's $178,000 3 years later. Right. Wow. The average deal size is grown that much because they're on purpose. They're, everybody that they're attracting now, because their companies are doing so much better, they're attracting the level of client that's willing to spend a couple $100,000, $500,000 with them. Sometimes it's 50, sometimes it's 75. But these big deals are much healthier for an organization because you can advertise a lot of margin in a much bigger deal than you can a bunch of little ones that you're competing against.
I would guess, you can correct me, but when you get people to trust you at that level where they'll, sign a contract for $200,000 or some number like that, they're very unlikely to decide to leave you the next time another deal comes up. They trusted you enough to invest a couple of $100,000. It's because they want you, and they want the honesty you bring, the passion you bring. They want those things with them for a long time. Is that what you find?
Not only is that true. I mean, like, I agree 100% with what you just said, but it allows you to also, on the other side of the coin, disqualify people who you know you can't help. You know what I'm saying? Like, yes, the relationship is tighter because not only can you make a promise you can keep, you keep the promise you made. I know that's crazy to hear these days, that people actually make promises and keep promises, but that is what our brand is all about, right? I mean, that is the definition of a brand. So yes, the relationship is there, but more importantly is on the front end of this thing, if trust is not there, it means your purpose isn't aligned to that person's purpose, right? So you can learn to disqualify clients because they are not going to have that long-term relationship. And that's one of the other things that I love about empowering the person who's not money motivated but purpose motivated, is they don't bring you the dead wood that drags your company into the mud.
Well, and my experience is that in that scenario you were just painting, where we are, the buyer and the seller share the purpose and we trust each other, we don't want to lose. I mean, sellers theoretically never want to lose buyers, but buyers also don't want to lose sellers who add value to them in the real world.
That's right.
You mentioned they're willing to pay a little extra. Well, my experience is they're willing to pay a little extra to make sure you don't go away, that you are surviving and thriving, and you're able to hire more people and train the people you have to keep getting better and better and better. So it's really, we describe customers in a revenue culture as part of the culture, because they get as much out of us being good as we get out of them being good.
Yeah, right. It's also interesting to note how many of my clients who adopt these principles now consider me, right, a quote unquote partner, or if you were to technically probably look at it at some perverted level, vendor. I mean, they invite me to company outings. They invite me. I am a visible part of the team, and they want me in that mix. And I'm not the only one. I mean, this is a standard process because they want everybody to feel like that they're moving forward, right, together as a family, if not a true partnership.
And we tell people, as in the revenue side of the business, we say, well, understand your customer. Well, in the example you just gave, where you give to your customer and they recognize what you've given and they invite you to the 4th of July picnic and to, this celebration at year end, that's how you really become intimate with them. It's not just looking them up on Google and,
right,
reading an annual report. Those are places to start, but that's not where you want to end up.
Oh, no. In fact, just before I got on the phone with you to do this call, one of my clients was asking me to do a talk on account management, right? Like, what is account management? And this is a really purpose-driven company. However, there is still some thinking that has to go into this, so that you own not just a person, you own all levels of the organization. You go deep into the organization. You can have quantifiable measures as to how well your relationship is working. One of which, how well do you know their strategic 5-year vision? How well do you know their 10-year vision? How well has your roadmap aligned to theirs? How many referrals a week do they give? How many dollars? How many years have they been with you? Is the dollars growing every year? Like, yes, you can quantify it, but at the same moment, the account never stops growing.
That's right.
Internally, because you continue to own the relationship because you're aligned purposely, right?
Well, and I love the way you said that. Too often, I think it's your frogs probably, but too often the frog thinks, well, if I can just get another 5% discount, that makes me really valuable. As opposed to what you're talking about is making their company better.
Yeah.
Not just making them cheaper, but making them better.
Right. Well, what's interesting is when you're purpose aligned, right, and you have an account. Like I had an account in COVID, right? I did not have an easy time going through COVID. I know a lot of companies didn't. So I know I'm not the only one, but because I was purpose driven, as bad as my cash flow was, I still had to go to my customers and do what was right for them, including, backing off my billings, right? And those types of things. But I was very proactive about those types of things, not because I was trying to get a sale, but because I knew it was the right thing to do in certain customers, not every customer, by the way. I had a lot of customers that made a lot of money during COVID. But if there was that situation, that's a purpose. That's not necessarily a discount, right? Those are strategic things you do, not reactive things you do.
So think of, you mentioned COVID a couple of times. What do you think is different on the sales revenue side of the equation today versus 3 years ago?
Well, I think first of all, let's discuss what isn't different, right? We're still human beings talking to human beings. The medium sometimes have changed because there's been some paranoia about the channel. Like we're doing a Zoom call, whereas we could have very well done this with the camera set up in my office or in your office, right? And did it in the same room. I don't know why we did that other than it was just convenient. We're both busy. I think what's different is we're latching on to the things that make us more productive, like maybe Zoom in certain cases. But there's a lot that really hasn't changed other than we have to get maybe over some fears. We have to get some paranoia out of the way. But for the companies that are thriving right now, have been thriving through it, there hasn't been a huge gargantuan change in terms of what we're doing, other than the mindset. Staying healthy, you stay healthy to your purpose. I've been working on a company now for 6 years, and we've gone literally from their living room to $120 million a year in revenue. And this is a highly functional team that knows exactly who their customer is, how they help them, and why they are there to help them. And nobody, COVID, competitors, nothing is going to get in their way. So I got to tell you, COVID may taught us a lot about having a weak company. I don't think it taught us a lot about having a really great company. You know what I mean? Because they seem to do very, very well.
That's one of my observations in COVID was those people who were very intentionally transferring value to their customers. And I mean value that the customer said, this is great stuff, and was willing to pay for. Those people during COVID, they might have had to change from face-to-face airplanes to Zoom, but they did really well during COVID.
Right.
The people who didn't have much value to transfer, they just hoped they would, be 2 cents cheaper than the other guy, or they'd find a deal nobody else had found, or, they'd find a way to convince somebody to give us a try. They had a terrible time during COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. At least, I have a training centers and people come to me normally for training. I'll never forget March 16th of 2020, nobody was showing up, right? So yeah, there's some things you had to reinvent in order to deliver your purpose, to deliver your promise. But the truth was that was just a medium, right? That's just the medium for it. So yeah, we went online. Yeah, we did certain things, but that was just like any best laid plan. Even if COVID didn't happen, it could have been a market crash. It could have been a recession. It could have been anything that your company has to be agile enough to go after, right? And I remember the bubble popping in 2000. I remember 9/11. I remember all of the big crashes of 2007 and 8. Every company has to have that agility to move in a situation, and the purpose-based companies typically do, right? I mean, the target's not changing, how I behave changes. That's really the difference.
That is exactly what COVID made clear. And I'm with you. I listened to all these people saying, well, this is a once in a generation. And I was with you. I was going, wait, I remember not the dot bomb, the 9/11, I'm going through the list of all the in a generation activities that all occurred in the last 20 years.
Yeah, exactly right. Probably you and I are the only ones that have ever found those down cycles. Maybe you and I are the only ones that ever saw them. I don't know. Yeah, bizarre.
You actually do the math and you figure out how long was the down cycle impacting us. And what it really tells you is someplace one out of every 3 years, or almost 2 out of every 3 years, has some kind of downside going on, depending on what industry you're in.
Right.
And so that's I loved your purpose point on it, because everybody I knew that really was committed to a purpose, they came out of it in some way. They came out of it most of the time a better company, because they asked themselves some tough questions. Right. And they gave themselves some really good answers. And, they were better prepared coming out than they were going in. That's for sure. So let's talk about culture for a minute, because I would guess, when you work with a company, and I know you don't just train a call center or, some customer service people or salespeople, you really get into the organization from the CEO through everybody that touches customers. How big a deal is culture today? And are people intentionally working on it, or is it an accidental outcome, or how does it work?
I got to tell you, in the last 3 to 5 years, it's probably become more conscious than unconscious, right? I think if we started talking about culture 5-7 years ago, we'd be met with a bunch of blank stares. I think a lot of CEOs and leadership today think of culture in terms of client retention. Excuse me, I didn't mean to say that. I meant to say employee retention, right? Or longevity, or getting the best people. By the way, which is true. I mean, if you have a great culture, you attract better people. At the bottom, that's absolutely true. So I think most CEOs think of that today. But if purpose is our guiding North Star, as perhaps you would say, then purpose is also the thing that is our derivative of what created our core values, right? So if this is customer focused and our core values are customer focused, then you're attracting people who are then client centered, and that creates efficiencies, that creates excitement, that creates attraction. From a sales point of view, it is one of those things back that when I had literally a year and a half ago, I had a client right in the middle of this whole doomsday when they had to lay off a bunch of people, and they started then regrowing. They said, we want to grow differently this time. So we literally worked on their purpose. We worked on their alignment to their core values. It said, this is what we're going to attract: people who have attitudes around this, that we will be disqualified this quickly if they see any of these other attributes to them. So it became this black, white, this right, wrong, easy filter to see an imposter versus a real person, right? So yes, it helped on the attraction side, but now that sales team, by the way, one of the other things that they did was they got rid of your traditional spiff models and payment plans. They actually brought people in selling more for less output in terms of dollars, because it's purpose driven, people that are driven to solve this problem for people rather than just making money, right? And they were paying some people, $125,000 base, that type of stuff, $150,000 bases. Well, they're bringing people in now for 75, right? And without these huge, you can make $500,000 here. They could make 200K, but they're much more productive, much more efficient from a dollar profitability standpoint.
And I guess they're a lot happier.
Yeah. The problem is, like with anything, the competition will snipe people from you. Now, even the salespeople at that point don't necessarily realize, oh, that company doesn't have all the same purpose and driven. So they've lost a few people by mistake for a couple of reasons, but they're still doing great and hiring and rehiring people. So they've got a great bench, right? They've got a great bench of people to hire.
When we look at the research that says your team is disengaged 70% of the time, when you hire the way you were describing, you hire for purpose, you hire for people who are passionate about doing the work. I can imagine that your disengaged time is more like 30% rather than 70%.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I know like one of your big metrics is number of selling hours per week, per month, right? I haven't measured that from a selling hours perspective. What I can say is closing ratios go up, right? Like if we go back to this word of trust, right? People like to do business that they trust. They like to do business with people that are like them. The closing ratios can literally go from 30 to 70%.
Yeah.
And that's when you got a killer team. For every 3 proposals you win 2. That's a pretty good number, right? So it's sad for me to hear about people who are happy with, oh, we broke 33% closing ratio. Woo! Yeah, we're at 34%. I got a company that came to me recently. They have a 21% closing ratio, and they're ecstatic. It was 19. That means for every 5 proposals they get 1, right? And they thought, oh man, we're really improving. We got to 21%.
Tell me, revenue sales impacts every person in the organization. One of the great things is people recognize we're here for a purpose. We are less, sheepish or feel bad about when we make a big profit, because we now know that our organization puts that money back into our people, into our training, and to additional tools, and helps us expand and do R&D that we couldn't do before. So in your work, do you see that being, in the companies where you're helping them make these transitions up to your professional sales level? Do you see the whole organization understanding why that's so important?
Not initially. Sometimes, it depends on the maturity of the curve, right? Like, so right now I like to be focused on companies under $100 million so I can get them to $300 to $500 million. I much rather double a company or triple a company than go after $1 billion company and change a few $100 million of revenue, right? Like I want to help these entrepreneurs get to their dream. So I don't think that they're consciously aware of how much more having $1 million or $3 million of profitability at the end of the year helps the health of the organization invest in their people, invest in their infrastructure, invest in attraction, marketing. Like companies who are used to surviving, I'll just say it this way, companies that are used to what I call the tolerance and acceptance of mediocrity, right? Like they don't know that they're stuck in the tolerance and acceptance of mediocrity. They're just like, oh, we're surviving. Yay, we ended up with, $10,000 a month of gross profit, right? They don't realize how much life would be better if they had $100,000 or $1 million a month of gross profit. They don't appreciate it because it's normal to them, to become, oh, yay, we cleared $50,000 of gross profit this month. They don't know what abundance looks like until they've experienced it once or twice. I don't know if I'm making sense here or not.
No, that's spot on. And it's right now there are certain companies that are in really good bubbles. There was this pent-up demand for 2 years, and now people can come out and start to spend some money, and so they tend to think about fulfillment, kind of like that AMC ticket counter thing.
Yeah.
You know, the airlines can fill every seat right now, and so they're happy. And they forget about the purpose when they spend all their time on just fulfillment. And you can understand why it happens, but we got to hope that we can kind of splash some cold water on them and wake them up.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So this has been great. Now, the last thing I'd like to ask you about is, as you think about the advice that you would like to give to first senior leadership. If senior leadership really wants to be that company you just talked about that goes from 100 million to 300 million, what should they be thinking about? And then the second question is, if you were talking to a group of people fairly early in their career, and they're trying to figure out, what should I do? Who should I work for? How do I make good decisions that will make me really glad I ended up where I went? What advice would you have for those two groups?
Well, I'm not sure that I got both groups. What was the distinction between both groups? I need you to rephrase the question for me, because, or just ask me the first question, because I think if we juxtapose them apart, I can answer them better, because it confuses me.
As you think about when you run into CEOs or CFOs or owners of companies today, what advice do you have for them that will really launch them into this, 2022 and beyond? What should they be thinking about?
Let me put it in the context of what we just talked about, right? Which is purpose alignment. And purpose is not something just to hire, just to attract, just to keep people. Purpose aligns the people on the front end of your business and the back end of your business. If purpose is truly done correctly, if you're talking to a CEO, which I do, and I know you do, purpose aligns all departments. As there's a customer flow, I think you use a river metaphor, I use a flow chart, but there's a flow that happens between the first marketing touch to the first sales touch to the first contract iteration, legal, then it goes through statements of work, and then it goes into contract signing, and then delivery, and then support. If you look at that process flow, there is nothing worse in the world to have a company who has imbalanced purpose, and the sales team is purpose driven, but the operation team isn't. So the sales team that goes out here, this literally happened this last week, where a sales professional who's purpose driven, company's purpose driven, makes these promises to this customer, sells $1.5 million worth of roofing services. They start executing on it. 3 out of 18 buildings that they started with 3 of these jobs and 3 buildings that they started to re-roof. And there's so many problems and there's so many broken promises. They may lose all 18 of these buildings because the operational team is not purpose aligned to what was promised as a company. So number one is just making sure that everybody is aligned on your team with your purpose, your processes, your systems, your structures, your strategy. Everything has to flow, right?
Amen. Amen. Now the second question, if you're talking to, let's just say, fairly young people in their career, they're either haven't had their first sales type job, or they've had one and they've learned enough that they're ready to make a real career decision and say, now I know the kind of place I'd like to work. What advice do you have for them? What should they be thinking about as they're making this part of a life commitment?
Yeah, I would make sure that you're not attracted to a shiny object, which is just a neat company that has a glossy logo or something like that. Like, if you ask yourself why 3 to 5 times, Why am I attracted to that company? Why? And it comes down to something to the effect after asking that. I love who they help. I want to contribute to people in that realm. Then there's alignment. If you're going after a job because you think you're going to make a lot of money at it, or they have a great brand, or that's so easy to sell, you're going to find out it's not so easy to sell. You know what I mean? Like, I see it happen all the time. So make sure that you have a passion for what you do, no matter where you go to work. That'll make you 10 times more successful than anything else. I'm talking about salespeople, right? There has to be a passion. There has to be a reason to go through all the pain and suffering of learning a job like this. And there is pain and suffering associated with it, right? There is this rejection. There's your interpretation of that rejection. There's a bunch of new skills, psychology you have to learn. There is a bunch of stuff about this career that requires the sharpening of the saw. And I've never been able to sharpen a saw without heat and friction, right? So there is a learning curve to it. So the net of that is make sure that this is whoever you're going to go work for sings to you at a deep, meaningful, emotional level. That's really my best advice to anybody thinking about going into sales.
Amen. So is there anything you'd like to leave us with? This has been great. This has been just terrific. Is there any kind of closing statement you'd like to make for all of us to be thinking about?
Well, the one thing that came out of this today that I just want to reiterate for anybody listening to this would be, watch the tolerance and acceptance of mediocrity everywhere, right? Like, for all of us, that if we have a purpose, we know, pretending we're Elon Musk, right? Oh, we can launch 5 satellites and lose 2. That would be a tolerance level that Elon Musk wouldn't put up with, because it's mediocre at best, right? So the question is, what does a high-performing, high-functioning team that's purpose-driven really sound like? And one of the things that in cultures we sometimes do is we like to avoid conflict, and we want harmony. And I think there is what we call unhealthy conflict. But I also think that there is very healthy conflict where Rick and Mike get into a room and we fight about what's best for this client. And it's not, oh, I'm picking on Rick. It's, no, Rick, this is what's best for the client. And that is the opposite of tolerance and acceptance and mediocrity. It is literally doing what's right for the customer, right? So I like healthy conflict. I think it's the thing that gets the best ideas into the marketplace. And most consultants that I like agree with that thought form. I don't know if that everybody does, but I think in today's world, people avoid conflict like it's going out of style, and I don't know that that's healthy for business.
Mike, I love that, and I can tell you, when we work with an enterprise and we certify people from all of the different silos, from finance and marketing and engineering and customer support and sales, they start out not speaking common language.
Right.
And, my undergraduate degree, I learned to speak accounting, and, then I got a degree in marketing, then I could speak marketing, but I never learned to speak all those other languages. And so, the conflict you're talking about to me is essential so that we all can learn some common language and some common approaches. And if we don't push a little bit, then all we do is just listen, not understand, and make decisions without any information.
Right. I completely agree.
That's scary.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So
brilliant.
I want to thank you, Mike, for being here today. This has been great. And, I'm looking forward to the chance maybe someday we'll get to do it again.
All right. Well, I'm always here for you, Rick. Thank you so much. And please, everybody, make sure you follow Rick no matter where you are. I promise you will never be disappointed. He's always got a new way to look at stuff. So, Rick, congratulations on all your success, and thank you for letting me be a part of your broadcast.
And I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We do 2 of these a month. We will look forward to seeing you the next time. Thank you.